By 1934, American railroads faced a crisis. The Great Depression had devastated passenger traffic, and the automobile was stealing what remained. But that February, something extraordinary happened. The Union Pacific unveiled its M10,000 train set, the very first streamlined passenger train ever introduced to the public. Just weeks later, the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy debuted the incredibly popular Pioneer Zephyr, the first streamliner powered by a diesel engine. These sleek, futuristic machines captured the imagination of a nation desperately hungry for hope and progress. People gathered by the thousands just to glimpse these trains of the future. Suddenly, every major railroad in America wanted one. The New York Central watched this revolution unfold with keen interest, but also with caution. Management understood the invaluable publicity such trains offered. During a time when business was down as a result of ongoing economic struggles, anything to attract folks back to the rails was eagerly considered. But they also understood something else. Many railroad companies were struggling mightily, and several would find themselves in bankruptcy before 1940. Spending millions on a style that was still under development and unproven seemed reckless. The New York Central needed a different approach. In 1934, the New York Central had already worked with an industrial designer named Henry Dreyfuss. He had created a streamlined shroud for their Commodore Vanderbilt locomotive, generating significant attention for the railroad. But Dreyfuss was not primarily a train designer. He had built his reputation creating consumer products like telephones, fountain pens, and vacuum cleaners. His approach was different from pure stylists. He applied what he called common sense and a scientific approach to design problems. In 1935, the Central asked Dreyfuss to take on an ambitious new project, design a complete streamlined passenger train from scratch. Dreyfuss threw himself into the work, and his team produced stunning designs. When the plans were put out for bid, however, the prices came back so out of line that the entire project was cancelled. For Dreyfuss, this was a devastating blow. The trains had been a major effort for his office. He decided to take the rest of the day off and boarded a train heading to the country. As his train passed through the railroad yards of Mott Haven in New York, Dreyfuss saw something that changed everything. Rows of unused passenger cars sat idle in the yards. Old commuter coaches from the 1920s, no longer needed, simply gathering dust. Dreyfuss got off the train, returned to New York, and proposed a radical idea to the Central's president. What if they could convert those surplus cars into something spectacular? What if they could build a streamliner at a fraction of the original cost? The New York Central agreed. The Mercury would be built from rebuilt equipment at 1/4 of the original figure. Work began at the New York Central's Beech Grove, Indiana shops. Crews took aging commuter coaches and began a remarkable transformation. While these cars would not be rebuilt from the ground up, considerable overhauling was carried out. Dreyfuss approached the Mercury as no designer had approached a train before. He treated it as an integrated whole, inside and out, from the locomotive to the rear observation car. His stated goal was to recreate the atmosphere of a private club on rails. The name Mercury was chosen for its connotations of speed, referencing the Roman god of messengers and commerce. On May 14, 1936, the New York Central announced the name to the public and began marketing the train as the Train of Tomorrow. The New York Central chose one of its K-Class 462 Pacific-type locomotives for the Mercury, specifically locomotive number 4915, built in 1926. But in Dreyfuss's hands, this workhorse would become something entirely different. Shop forces in West Albany, New York, completely shrouded the locomotive, covering the exterior pipes, whistles, and other fittings in a smooth cowl that observers would compare to an inverted bathtub. But Dreyfuss made one crucial decision that set the Mercury apart from other streamlined locomotives. He cut away the sides of the cowl to expose the massive driving wheels. The drivers were given a distinctive appearance with centers painted in aluminum and a black band separating the aluminum discs from the rim and tire. But Dreyfuss went further still. He installed lighting under the cowling on either side to illuminate the drivers and connecting rods. 3 50-watt and 2 15-watt lamps bathed the churning wheels in light. The effect at night was described as most striking. This was purportedly the first time any locomotive had featured illuminated driving wheels. Dreyfuss understood that a steam locomotive at speed was pure theatre, and he refused to hide the drama behind a steel curtain. The exterior of the locomotive and cars received a medium grey livery with brushed aluminum trim. On each side, the passenger cars displayed the Mercury logo as a silver medallion showing the god Mercury in traditional representation with winged cap and sandals. The interior transformation was perhaps even more remarkable than the exterior. Dreyfuss's primary concern was to mitigate what he saw as the fundamental problem with railroad cars: their rigid uniformity and long, narrow form. His solution was revolutionary. Although each car was functionally separate, Dreyfuss designed the interior to minimize the divisions between them. Sections of the train spanned car boundaries. The coach section comprised the rear of the first car, the whole of the second, and the forward part of the third. The kitchen occupied the rear of the third car, while the dining room was in the car that followed. The vestibules between cars received special attention. Dreyfuss made each vestibule semicircular and widened the passageway between cars to 1.6 meters, or about 5 feet 3 inches. When cars were coupled together, these vestibules created the effect of a single circular room, like a miniature rotunda. Fabric and rubber buffers between cars and above the bogie springs reduced vibrations. Within individual cars, Dreyfuss applied techniques to break up the space. In one coach, he interrupted the rows of seating by placing pairs of seats facing each other across the aisle in the middle of the car. The parlor car was divided into 2 sections with a small private compartment, seating 6 in between them. The dining room was arranged in 3 sections. 2 featured conventional seating, but the middle section had tables for 2 people seated side by side, facing the center aisle. A small lounge section seating 6 provided space for passengers waiting to be seated. The observation car received Dreyfuss's most innovative treatment. To maximize the view, he lowered the windowsills in the observation area by 30 centimeters, allowing windows that were 1.23 meters high, roughly 4 feet. Instead of placing seating around the walls facing inward, Dreyfuss placed the seating in the center facing out toward the windows. Banquettes for 3 faced each side, with 1 for 2 facing the rear. In a final touch, a speedometer was built into the center banquette, a constant reminder of the Central's emphasis on speed. The complete train featured pastels, carpeting, sealed windows, indirect lighting, and air conditioning. Art Deco touches appeared throughout. In June 1936, the completed Mercury began test runs on a 200-mile stretch between Indianapolis and Sheff, Indiana. During these trials, the train reached speeds of 93 miles per hour. Although the service speed would be restricted to 80 miles per hour, it was reported that the train's top speed exceeded 100 miles per hour. The trains incorporated roller bearings on their axles, which helped them reach their speed limits but also made them harder to stop. On June 25, 1936, the Mercury was displayed and christened in Indianapolis. Then began an exhibition tour throughout the New York Central system. The train made stops from Indianapolis to New York City, where it was displayed for 2 days at Grand Central Terminal on June 28th and 29th. The public response was overwhelming. When the Mercury was displayed in Chicago at LaSalle Street Station on July 6th, approximately 17,250 people viewed the train in a single day. Revenue service for the Cleveland Mercury began on July 15, 1936. The train operated a daily round trip between Cleveland and Detroit, with only a stop in Toledo between its 2 endpoints. The corridor covered 164.6 miles, and the Mercury completed the trip in about 2 hours and 50 minutes. Tragically, the inaugural run was not without incident. On that first day of service, the Mercury was involved in a collision at a level crossing that killed the automobile driver. By September 1936, the New York Central found something remarkable. The new Mercury service had not cannibalized ridership on other trains it operated between Cleveland and Detroit. The Mercury had generated entirely new traffic. The success demanded expansion. A second Mercury train set was built and displayed in Indianapolis in October 1939. This train entered regular service on November 12, 1939, as the Chicago Mercury, operating between Chicago and Detroit via Kalamazoo and Jackson. The two train sets were cleverly scheduled to maximize their use. One train set would begin the day in Cleveland, run to Detroit as the Cleveland Mercury, then continue from Detroit to Chicago as the Chicago Mercury. The other set did the reverse run. The Cleveland run maintained its 2-hour 50-minute schedule, while the Chicago run took 4 hours and 45 minutes. On April 28, 1941, the James Whitcomb Riley entered service, running between Cincinnati and Chicago on a schedule of 5 hours and 15 minutes. Named after the popular poet because of his association with Indiana and Americana, this train used the same design as the other Mercuries, although it was an all-coach train. Though it did not bear the Mercury name, it is considered part of the Mercury family. The Cincinnati Mercury followed the Riley into service, running between Cincinnati and Detroit on a schedule of 6 hours and 30 minutes. The success of the Mercury had consequences far beyond its own roots. Henry Dreyfuss's work proved his ability to design railroad equipment as integrated, beautiful wholes. This led to one of the most significant commissions in American railroad history. In 1938, the New York Central asked Dreyfuss to redesign their flagship train, the legendary 20th Century Limited between New York and Chicago. This became one of the most famous trains in the United States. The railroad's initial frugality gave way to massive investment. The New York Central spent an astonishing $90 million during and immediately after World War II to re-equip its passenger fleet. This provided 720 new cars from Pullman Standard, Budd Company, and American Car and Foundry. The Mercury trains operated at speeds of 75 to 80 miles per hour throughout their service career. At these velocities, level crossing accidents could be catastrophic. In one accident in Michigan in 1940, the train struck a car at a level crossing, completely destroying the vehicle and killing the driver. The wreckage was pushed approximately 3/4 of a mile from the scene of the collision. In August 1938, the Mercury struck a car at a crossing and stopped to investigate. The Commodore Vanderbilt, which had been only 5 minutes behind the Mercury by schedule, collided with the rear of the stopped Mercury. At least 50 people were injured, some seriously. The engineer of the Vanderbilt had applied the brakes when the signal changed in front of him, but wet rails caused wheel slipping and prevented the train from stopping in time. After World War II, the Mercury trains were re-equipped with new lightweight cars. But the age of the passenger train was ending. The Cincinnati Mercury was the first to fall, eliminated in October 1957. The Chicago Mercury followed in April 1958. The original Cleveland Mercury, the train that had started it all, made its last run on July 11, 1959. The James Whitcomb Riley survived longer, though it was no longer a streamliner. In 1971, Amtrak combined the Riley with the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway's George Washington. The combined service was renamed Cardinal in 1977, which continues running to this day. The Mercury trains have been called a turning point in railroad design. Henry Dreyfuss described them as the first streamliners done as a unit, inside and out, integrating everything from locomotives to dinner china. What the New York Central created from surplus commuter coaches and a decade-old locomotive proved that vision mattered more than budget. Dreyfuss transformed cast-off equipment into rolling sculptures that captured the imagination of a nation. The Mercury taught American railroads that streamlining was not merely about going faster, it was about creating an experience, an atmosphere, a journey that passengers would remember. From the illuminated driving wheels churning through the night to the speedometer built into the observation car banquette, every detail communicated one message. The future had arrived. In an era when America desperately needed to believe in tomorrow, the Mercury delivered exactly that. It was not just a train, It was a promise on rails.